Hello everybody, welcome back to ACE SAT. In today's video, we're solving yet another real SAT math question from the official College Educator question bank. This one with ID 85939DA5, Advanced Math. So, in a study of cell phone use, 799 randomly selected US teens were asked how often they talked on the cell phone and about their texting behavior. Data are summarized in the table above. Based on the data from the study, an estimate of the percent of US teens who are heavy texters is 30%, and the associated margin of error is 3%. Which of the following is a correct statement based on the given margin of error? So here we can see that approximately 30% of the associated of US teens are heavy texters. So that would be around 240 people out of 799. So the study actually summarized as well that the margin of error would be also 3%. So it may be between 27% or 33%. So they may have considered that 3 less percent were heavy textures and 3 more percent were heavy textures. So in some cases, that would mean that, approximately 3% of teens aren't heavy textures. At the same time, there could be 3% more teens who are heavy textures. Obviously, this is done from a study. So this is done from a small sample and projected into a bigger sample, which is US teens, which are US teens. So if we're going to the options here, we're just going to go by process of elimination. So for option A, we know that approximately 3% of the teens in the study who are classified as heavy textures are not really heavy textures. Obviously, this is partially correct because what should have been the option would be approximately 3% of the teens in the study who are classified as heavy textures are not really heavy textures or are heavy textures. And this is a small trick because here they 3% could be heavy textures just as they could not have been heavy textures. So that is what they mean by margin of error. It doesn't mean that it's only 3% less, but it could also be 3% more who are heavy textures. So option A is disqualified. Now option B says it is not possible, hence impossible, that the percent of all US teens who are heavy textures is less than 27%. So here I disagree because obviously it is extremely unlikely because we've done a pretty big we've taken from a pretty big sample of US teens, but it is not impossible because at the same time, we are given a sample. It is not a real or actual representation of the amount of people or amount of teens that use texting pretty heavily. Therefore, it is unlikely given the substantial size of the sample, but it is not impossible. C. Now, C says that the percent of all US teens who are heavy textures is 33%. Now, this is just wrong because obviously 30% in itself, what we found, or what the study suggested, is in itself an uncertainty. Now, it could have been so most likely what would have been correct would be 27% or 28% or 29% or 30%, 31%, 33% or 33%. Now all of those percentages hold somewhat of a similar percentage of being the correct answer or the correct value. But even those, I mean, seven percentages are not the full, are not do not consist of 100%. Now it may even go down to 26% or 34%. So we cannot be 100% sure that the amount of heavy textures is 33%. So the uncertainty is pretty important here. We are very uncertain about 33% and about all the percentages that we are provided in this question. Now, in option D, it is doubtful the percent of all US teens who are heavy texters is 35%. Now, as I've said in question B, it is very unlikely that, the percentage of heavy textures would be 27%, just as it would be unlikely that the percent of all the US teens who are heavy textures is 35%, because in our approximation, it is an estimation. It is some kind of inference we've made from some kind of evidence. Obviously, it does not represent the true or infallible truth, but it is probable that the percentage of US teens that use texting pretty heavily is between 27 and 33%. Therefore, anything exceeding that or, you know, is below that figure is unlikely to be correct. Therefore, it is doubtful that the percent of all doubtful is the same as unlikely. Therefore, option D is correct.